Press play to listen to this article by Jack Blanchard. Sent tips here. Subscribe for free. View in your browser. Good Tuesday morning. Last night in the Commons we have liftoff. MPs last night voted overwhelmingly in favour of approving a third runway at London Heathrow Airport, one of the biggest UK infrastructure sagas of recent times edged closer to a conclusion after the government won backing for the £14 billion expansion plan by 415 votes to 119. As predicted, a majority of Labour MPs backed the expansion after being granted a free vote by Jeremy Corbyn, though he and most of the party leadership voting against. Only 8 Tory MPs rebelled against the three-line whip imposed by Theresa May. Spotted Transport Secretary Chris Grayling toasting his victory on the Commons terrace last night with a pint of Stella and a bottle of Bulmers. Not spotted Boris Johnson, obviously. The Tory rebels, all 8 were, like Johnson, MPs with constituency interests close to London: Windsor MP Adam Afriyie, Southend West MP David Amos, Harrow East MP Bob Blackman, Richmond Park MP Zach Goldsmith, Putney MP Justine Greening, Chelsea and Fulham MP Greg Hands, Hendon MP Matthew Offord, Chipping Barnet MP Teresa Villiers. The Labour numbers: in total 119 Labour MPs backed the expansion, with 94 opposed. The most senior members of the Shadow Cabinet all voted against the plan, including Leader Jeremy Corbyn, Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry, Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott and Shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer. But other senior frontbenchers backed the expansion, including Shadow Health Secretary John Ashworth, Shadow Education Secretary Angela Rayner, Chief Whip Nick Brown and Party Chairman Ian Lavery. The reaction? CBI boss Carolyn Fairbairn, 50 years in the making, this is a truly historic decision that will open the doors to a new era in the UK's global trading relationships. Mike Cherry of the Federation of Small Businesses, the debate is now over, it is time to build. National Infrastructure Commission Chairman John Owermott, I'm pleased MPs have given their backing to the expansion. This country's busiest airports have been stretched to their limits for years. Greenpeace's Executive Director John Savin, this Heathrow flight has failed all safety checks. We can't just look the other way while the whole dashboard flashes red with warning lights. See you in court. Anti-Heathrow campaigners last night announced plans to challenge the decision at the High Court. A judicial review is being launched by 4 London local authorities affected: Wandsworth, Richmond, Hillingdon and Hammersmith, and Fulham, in partnership with Greenpeace and London Mayor Sadiq Khan. Experts tell The Times they believe legal action could delay the runway's expected 2026 opening date by up to 2 years. Protests outside the chamber. Climate change campaigners invaded Central Lobby last night as the debate was winding up. Around a dozen protesters staged "Lion" and chanted anti-Heathrow songs, before eventually being ordered out by police. And protests inside. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell told MPs his constituents face the biggest forcible move of human beings since the Scottish Highland clearances. Former Trade Minister Greg Hands added, I think this proposal is fundamentally flawed, but this vote is also about integrity and about the pledges we make to our electors. A grumpy Zach Goldsmith tweeted, as an MP for an area that will be massively affected by Heathrow expansion, it is absurd, perverse, that I had to cram my arguments into a 4-minute speech. GOVT taking the P*SS. Also taking the P*SS, Zach Goldsmith, who resigned as an MP in 2016 over the Conservatives' support for a third runway, vowing to come back to Parliament as an independent. He immediately lost his seat. So Goldsmith stood again as a Conservative candidate 9 months later, knowing full well the party was backing Heathrow expansion. He was re-elected. But the king of taking the P*SS, Boris Johnson, landed back in the UK. In the early hours of this morning, having missed the vote due to vital government business in Afghanistan that absolutely had to be done yesterday. Happily, he's back in time for Cabinet at 9:30 a.m. And then Foreign Office questions in the Commons at 11:30 a.m., which you'd imagine will be worth a watch. Repost: Boris allies were last night pointing to an expected decision at National Security Council today on sending extra troops to Afghanistan as a reason for his urgent mission to Kabul. They also highlighted this tweet from Labour MP Emma Dent as showing how a cabinet-level resignation would simply have handed a PR victory to Labour, while achieving nothing of substance. The government majority was 225, one texts to say. Boris also gets some much-needed backing from The Sun, which says he is right to stay in the cabinet and fight for a harder Brexit. Watching Brief, on Newsnight last night, political editor Nick Watt reported Boris is really annoyed with the Prime Minister for not granting a free vote, believing No. 10 was purposefully trying to embarrass him. Watt suggested Boris may seek his revenge by trying to bring her down from within, if the PM presses ahead with plans for a softer Brexit than he would like. EU looking into retail restrictions. The European Commission intends to launch a study with an external contractor to gather evidence on the scope and spread of territorial restrictions in retail across the EU. DG Grow will pilot the project and overtly counts on the AB InBev investigation to extend its knowledge about these restrictions. If the Commission suspects that dodgy practices are common, why isn't Vestager opening a market inquiry? Politico Competition Pro will investigate. Don't miss the coverage. Email pro@politico.eu to benefit from a complimentary trial. ***, driving the day incoming. The next European Council summit is now just 2 days away and Theresa May should get ready for a barrage of abuse from EU 27 leaders about the lack of progress on Brexit. We might get a flavor this evening when the EU's chief negotiator Michel Barnier gives a press conference in Luxembourg. Barnier is attending today's meeting of the EU's General Affairs Council, the pre-summit forum where many of the actual decisions tend to be made. He's due to speak at 7 p.m. UK time, once the meeting has wound up. Watch a live stream here. Bobdov, for her part, May hosted European Council President Donald Tusk in No. 10 last night and explained the government still hasn't agreed a position. The PM said the UK will be setting out more detail on the UK's vision for the future relationship in a white paper, after the June Council, a Downing Street spokesman said. First, May has the small matter of getting her warring cabinet to agree on exactly what that white paper should say. Next week's away day at Chequers should be a barrel of laughs. Carrot, stick. The Sun's man in Brussels Nick Gutteridge reports the draft conclusions drawn up by the EU 27 ahead of the summit have been tweaked to include a so-called devolution clause designed to coax Theresa May into abandoning her Brexit red lines. It says the EU will reconsider its offer on trade if she does so. The article, joint bylined with Harry Cole, adds that, in the meantime, May has been told to expect the rebuke from French President Emmanuel Macron over the recent lack of progress. Meanwhile in Dublin, the grim state of UK-EU relations following the past few months of deadlock are laid bare in a telling comment made recently to an impeccable playbook sourced by a senior member of the Irish government. Asked how negotiations with Brexit Secretary David Davis were going, the Irish minister replied, "We deal with Ollie Robbins. We don't deal with a T-boy." Oofed. Scoop, no-fly zone. EU 27 countries have been ordered by the European Commission to prepare their airports and aviation sector for a no-deal Brexit, Politico's Same Said revealed last night. The warning came during a June 12 meeting chaired by Philip Cornelis, Director of Aviation at the Commission's Transport Department, and attended by EU 27 diplomats and representatives of their civil aviation authorities. The approach was different compared to the last seminar, one official present said. It could be the Commission has realized stakeholders have not done much thus far, and is genuinely worried. On the upside, one nation at least is breaking ranks with Brussels and warning that any failure to strike a deal with Britain would be devastating for the EU. In an interview with the Daily Mail's John Stevens, Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó says, if the EU is not able to come to an agreement with the UK, then it will end up with a further decrease in its competitiveness, which has already suffered in recent years. If we are not able to come to a deal with a country that represents 14% of our economy, that would lead to a situation that would be very devastating for the EU. Hungary, like the Wolf Playbook, heartily recommends last night's must-see interview with Szijjártó on Newsnight, as the BBC's fearless Emily Maitlis laid out the charge sheet against Viktor Orban's increasingly authoritarian government. Read the Human Rights Watch report here. You recall lies, an ice-faced Szijjártó told her. Essential viewing. Not Brexit, but while we're talking last night's telly, Newsnight's investigation into the insidious threat from Polish far-right extremists in Britain is also well worth your time. Watch the item in full. May vs. Business. Today's main event will see Theresa May address the captains of British industry with a speech at the Times CEO Summit. Number 10 said her focus will be the role of a modern industrial strategy in helping the UK to seize economic opportunities post-Brexit. The timing is somewhat awkward, however, coming just days after her Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, reportedly dismissed industry concerns about Brexit with the casual riposte, business. Then her Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, went on telly at the weekend to attack one of Britain's biggest manufacturers for warning about the impact of a no-deal scenario. The Times' Rachel Sylvester is not impressed. Will the PM seek to build bridges today? Also in the Brexit diary, London Mayor Sadiq Khan is in Parliament this morning to give his views on Brexit to the Commons Public Administration Committee at 9:45 a.m. He will again bang the drum for single market access for London's vast services sector. Greek PM Alexis Tsipras is in town and will hold talks with May and No. 10 this afternoon ahead of Thursday's European Council Summit, and Defence Minister Guido Beb is before the Commons Science Committee at 4:10 p.m. to discuss the ongoing row with Brussels over the Galileo satellite program. And finally, the EU withdrawal bill should finally receive royal assent today, a mere 11.5 months after first being introduced in Parliament. We've seen more than 250 hours of debate in the Commons and the Lords, some 200 tweaks and amendments, but only one serious government defeat. It's been a hell of a ride. Today in Westminster, get well soon. Britain's most powerful civil servant Jeremy Haywood will be off work until September as he receives further treatment for cancer. No. 10 announced yesterday. Civil Service Chief Executive John Manzoni will assume Haywood's responsibilities over staffing, but stepping into the critical role of Cabinet Secretary for the next 3 months will be Mark Sedwill, a close ally of Theresa May who is currently her national security advisor at No. 10. Sedwill was previously the top civil servant at the Home Office, and his temporary promotion may not be welcomed by those lobbying for defense funding. Sedwill wants a big switch of focus towards cyber warfare. Haywood has also played a crucial role in the Brexit negotiations, and it is unclear what impact his absence will have. Judgment Day for Uber. A judge at Westminster Magistrates Court is today expected to decide whether a ride-hailing app Uber can continue to operate in London. TfL said in September it would not renew Uber's license due to fears over its safety record, though Uber maintains it has since cleaned up its act. Read the Evening Standard's report on yesterday's proceedings here. Politico's Mark Scott recently sat down with Uber's new CEO to discuss its response to a challenging European market. Sex allegations. The Sun splashes today on allegations about a Tory MP's love life. He has declined to comment. Committee Corridor. Prisons Minister Rory Stewart discusses the size of the prison population before the Commons Justice Committee at 10 a.m. Channel 4 Chief Executive Alex Mann gives evidence to the Commons Culture Committee at 10:30 a.m. On the channel's 2017 annual report, Scotland Yard's new counter-terror chief Neil Bosu and the government's independent reviewer of terror laws Max Hill are among the witnesses giving evidence on the counter-terrorism and border security bill. Armed Forces Minister Tobias Ellwood and Health Minister Jackie Doyle-Price discuss mental health problems suffered by serving and former armed forces personnel before the Commons Defence Committee at 11:30 a.m. And BMW chief Graham Grieve discusses vehicle recalls before the Commons Transport Committee at 4:15 p.m. Hopefully they'll ask him about Brexit as well. Leadership bid klaxon. Liz Truss makes the Telegraph splash this morning with a warning that mimicking Labour's approach to tax and spend will see the Tories crushed at the next election. The ambitious chief secretary to the Treasury furnishes her right-wing credentials with a punchy op-ed urging those cabinet colleagues demanding extra cash to spend existing budgets more wisely. In comments aimed at Defense Secretary Gavin Williamson, she writes, "It's not macho to demand more money. It's much tougher to demand better value for money." Truss also takes a swipe at Environment Secretary Michael Gove's plan to ban wood-burning stoves, as she makes the case for a more libertarian approach. Truss speaks at the LSE tonight. Also in Speaker's Corner, Lib Dem leader Vince Cable makes a speech on housing policy. Transport Secretary Chris Grayling addresses the annual summit of the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. Treasury Minister John Glenn and former Business Secretary Peter Mandelson address the Investment Association's annual policy conference, and Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt speaks at the Royal College of Physicians annual conference. Online campaigning. The government's elections watchdog publishes a major report today demanding more transparency over online campaigning during elections. The Electoral Commission says there are concerns democracy is threatened by the impact of outside influence on UK elections, and wants online laws brought into line with those governing printed campaign materials. It also calls for bigger fines for those who breach the rules and an explicit ban on foreign influence. The Guardian splashes the story. Fuel poverty. The annual report on fuel poverty will be published by the Department for Business at 9:30 a.m. After Carillion, former No. And policy guru Dan Korsky writes for Politico today on why the government must no longer remain so reliant on a tiny number of outsourcing firms. Is it really right that government is so reliant on a few players in markets like security services and facilities management, he asks. How did we reach such a level of market consolidation that has stifled innovation in public services, and created a climate of complacency among larger providers? Uber is in London this week and Facebook heads to Brussels to head up discussions with regulators and politicians. Find out what lawmakers want from these tech giants and more with our morning technology newsletter. To test it out, email pro@politico.eu mentioning morning tech. Media Round Today program. Labour MP Madeline Moon, 7:15 a.m. Former Chief of the Defence Staff General Nick Hutton, 8:10 a.m. Welsh First Minister Carwyn Jones, 8:10 a.m. Nick Ferrari at breakfast. LBC Radio. Windsor and Maidenhead Council Leader Simon Dudley, 7:05 a.m. Labour peer and former Infrastructure Chief Andrew Adonis, 7:10 a.m. Heathrow Airport Boss John Holland K, 7:50 a.m. All Out Politics. Sky News, 10 a.m. Brial Hume's Editor-in-Chief Abdul Bari Atwan discusses the Middle East, 10 a.m. The Sunday Times Deputy Political Editor Caroline Wheeler and WikiLeaks lawyer Jennifer Robinson review the newspaper comment sections, 10:15 a.m. Tory MP John Lamont, Labour MP Tulip Sadiq and SNP MP Neil Gray debate calls to reform Parliament's archaic voting system, 10:30 a.m. Legendary U.S. reporter Seymour Hersh discusses his new memoir, 10:45 a.m. Daily Politics, BBC 2, noon, Seymour Hersh, plus Times columnist Rachel Sylvester. Reviewing the papers tonight, BBC News, 10:40 p.m. Sunday Express political editor Camilla Tomaini and The Guardian's deputy editor Paul Johnson. Sky News, 10:30 p.m. Today's front pages. Click on the publication's name to see its front page. City AM, City hits back at EU hard talk. Daily Express, exhausted doctors act like drunks. Daily Mail, passports for sale on Facebook. Daily Mirror, Bucks FizJ, my mouth cancer nightmare. Financial Times, Trump tariffs drive Harley to build EU bikes outside US. HuffPost, takeoff for Heathrow. Johnson takes flak on runway Dodge. Metro, Bojo's no-show for Heathrow. The Daily Telegraph, tax and spend will harm Tories, Truss warns cabinet colleagues. The Guardian, urgent action needed to defend UK democracy, says watchdog. The Independent, Air Farce 1, Boris faces calls to resign. The Sun, married Tory MP's love child with aid. The Times, MPs back £14 billion Heathrow expansion. On the continent, read what the rest of Europe's papers are saying in Politico's EU Press Review blog here, updated daily at around 8 a.m. Beyond the M25 from Berlin diplomatic incident, Donald Trump's new man in Berlin, Ambassador Rick Grenell, continues to ruffle feathers by breaking every basic rule of diplomacy. Writing for Politico today, Emily Schultheis says German politicians are dismayed by his approach. None of his predecessors intervened in domestic politics or created controversy in such a way, says Stefan Liebich, a member of the German parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee from the left-wing political party Die Linke. It's very, very unusual, and I was surprised and disconcerted by it. From Istanbul, Erdogan tightens his grip. Moderate voices in Turkey are increasingly fearful for the future after authoritarian ruler Recep Tayyip Erdogan's election victory on Sunday. Laura Pittle writes for the FT here about what he plans to do next. And writing for Politico, Turkish author Elif Shafak says her country is no longer a true democracy. Trump rally. Donald Trump delivered one of his more surreal performances at a raucous rally in South Carolina last night. The Toronto Star's Washington reporter Daniel Dale, who has spent years cataloging Trump's persistent exaggerations and untruths, live tweeted the whole thing. It's well worth a read. London calling Westminster weather, cool cool cool. It's another absolute scorcher, with blazing sunshine all day and highs of 27 C. By George, The Observer's Carol Cadwalader was last night awarded the Orwell Prize for Journalism for her reporting on the Facebook data leak scandal. The judges said they believed that, if George Orwell had been here, he would have been unanimous in choosing our winner. The Orwell Prize for exposing Britain's social evils went to the FT's Sarah O'Connor and colleagues for their terrific feature on Blackpool and other left-behind towns that had the whole of SW1 buzzing last year. Heavens above, The Spectator's managing editor Will Heaven is joining the policy exchange think tank as director of policy. Guido got the scoop. Happy birthday to Immigration Minister Caroline Noakes, Bradford South MP Judith Cummins, Lib Dem peer Bob McLennan, and Vince Cable's chief spinner Mark Leftley, who turns 40. Playbook couldn't happen without my editors Oya Sheftilovich. Subscribe to the Politico newsletter family. Brussels Playbook, London Playbook, Sunday Crunch, Brussels Influence, DC Playbook, all our Politico Pro Policy morning news.